Welcome to Reimagined Childhood, brought to you by Early Childhood Christian Network, where we equip you with the tools you need so you can confidently care for and teach young children. We know you want to provide the very best early childhood experience for children and for their parents. But sometimes you feel frustrated and ill equipped because the training that's required is not interesting or it's just not applicable to your daily needs in the classroom. In every episode, we reveal practical, applicable strategies to use in your classroom that will create a lasting impact and will help children build the foundations they need for a lifetime of success. It's time to reimagine our approach to childhood. I'm your host, Monica Healer. My guest today is Dr. Nicole Wilke. She is a researcher, missionary, author, and marriage and family therapist dedicated to improving care for vulnerable children and families. She serves as director of the Center on Applied Research for Vulnerable Children and Families, an initiative of the Christian Alliance for Orphans, impacting millions across 130 nations. With a background in both research and hands-on care, Nicole has led international studies, authored numerous resources, and developed tools to strengthen families and reform care systems. She currently lives in Peru with her family, continuing her global work to see children thrive in safe, loving homes. Our conversation today centers around trauma, early adversity, and resilience. I think you are going to love, first of all, Nicole's personality and her passion for young children and for God and for how God has created all of us to live with purpose, even if we've experienced adversity or pain or trauma or challenge. She's very practical in how she provides information. So let's jump into this fun conversation with Dr. Nicole Wilke. Nicole, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast today.
I'm so grateful for the invitation. Thanks for having me.
Hey, we are talking today about trauma, early adversity, resilience, those topics that feel a little bit heavy, but I think we have a lot to learn about how God has created us as people to endure hardship and to actually use hardship in our lives as a way to glorify Him, to remember that it's not the end of the world. You've co-written a book called Overcoming that I just was able to read last week. It's so good. We'll link to it in the show notes. And also a kid's book called Koala's Comeback Ride, which I loved. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. But in the book, there was a quote in there that said something like, adversity is not your destiny. It's a description of something that's happened. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what you said. Adversity, trauma is not your destiny. It's a description of something that's happened to you. So I'd love for you to start out, first of all, describing some of the terms that I think we sometimes get confused. Trauma, adversity, resilience. Tell us what they actually are and then how they all fit together.
I will say it is heavy, but it is hopeful.
Yeah.
It's important to start there that you're right. Negative experiences like trauma and adversity are not the end of the story, and they are not your child's destiny. Adversity is a measurable, objective, negative experience that a child goes through, and it requires them to respond in a way that's not developmentally appropriate. A parent dies, divorce, extreme illness, abuse, neglect, violence, exploitation, those types of things, we can see, hey, that's really horrible. This is not the way it's supposed to be, right? Trauma is distinct from that in that it requires an early adversity or an adversity in general, but it actually requires this instantaneous perception of threat that an individual would experience as they're going through the adversity. So I'm either going to perceive that my life and limb are at risk, or sometimes with children, especially in the early childhood stage, it can also be at risk to the mom. We see that sometimes they're experiencing domestic violence and little 2-year-old thinks that mommy might not make it. This can be a really traumatic situation. So it is based on this subconscious perception of threat. It's not the type of perception where after a child goes through this and they've experienced a trauma, we can just convince them that it actually wasn't a trauma. It is subconscious. It is something that is very much in the body and in the brain itself. Resilience is one of the most hopeful scientific reflections of the truth of Scripture, of hope, of redemption, of recovery, purpose, and future, because in essence, it's the ability to overcome obstacles. We are promised by Jesus himself that we will experience difficulties, but he has overcome the world. And that's where we see resilience. Certainly with little people experiencing really difficult things, it is discouraging, frustrating enough to lead us to despair. But what we see through scripture and science is that God can take what the enemy intended for evil and use it for good in their lives, helping them to overcome that and helping them to actually strengthen that ability to overcome that muscle so that they can overcome lots of things in their lives and go on to thrive.
I think over the last couple of decades, there's been a whole lot of scientific research around trauma and resilience. But what you've done, you and your cohort, Amanda Howard, what y'all have done is really looked at the science around trauma, adversity, resilience, not just in children, but you've done it from a faith perspective. So talk to me a little bit about why was that your approach and how does that impact how you've approached this whole topic by doing it through faith?
I think for me, just holistically within my life, the agreement between scripture and science are extremely enlivening and exciting because
Yeah.
certainly we have all that we need in scripture, and largely I would agree with that. When it comes to the specificities of how we go about applying the lessons that we see in scripture, it can be really difficult. There is no verse that tells me at what age should I allow my child to use an iPad. There's
Right.
lots of things that are not going to be addressed at that more granular level. What we see is that we can take science and figure out where we're getting these repeated results, because good science will always be the discovery of God's creation. God created
I
it,
love
he
that.
ordered it, and science is simply the discovery of it. And where we see it repeated over time, let's take note of this and see, does this align with scripture? And 9 times out of 10, it will. It certainly does in this conversation. In scripture, we have biblical characters who are experiencing really difficult adversity, many of them from a very young age. You've got Joseph, who's being sold by his family into slavery. You've got Daniel as an exile, David, who's on the run. So many stories and examples where people are going through really hard things. This is not to say that those things are not important, that they don't matter, that they're overstated. By no means. It is something that makes me think of the John Piper quote where he said, we must first understand the gravity of our sin to understand the glory of the gospel. And I say that when we're looking at early adversity and trauma, we must acknowledge just how horrible it is, how detrimental it is, how devastating it is, and allow that to actually elevate and magnify the goodness of God as he helps us to overcome it. It's not to say, hey, it's not that bad. It is that bad. It might be worse than that bad, but God is so big that nothing is impossible for him, and he can help us to overcome, help our children to overcome these horrible situations. So when we're looking at science and scripture, I want to see where those two meet, where are they reinforcing, where is science confirming or even breaking down into smaller bits what scripture says and telling us how we can apply it.
So good, Nicole. I love the way you said that. Science is just the discovery of God's goodness. The discovery of God's creation is science. If we can come to that mindset, so many things make so much more sense, and we don't have to fight nearly as much against what sometimes can feel like a battle against scripture. There's no case of real science proving scripture wrong. So I love that perspective. So let's jump into this early adversity conversation. Talk a little bit about how early adversity in childhood can really affect development.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say it of course is going to depend a little bit on the type of early adversity. A child experiencing cancer versus a child experiencing abuse at the hands of their parents will probably produce different results. But there are a few common themes that we're going to see across situations. One is that where we see disrupted attachment, especially in situations of maltreatment, this has the potential to create the lens through which the child will see all relationships throughout their lives. So relationally, socially, attachment, the construct of attachment, it's really primarily being built in that first like 7 to 18 months, but then throughout early childhood, where we have damaged attachment, it can be built back up. There is good news. There is hope in that, especially if acted upon by loving caregivers who want to change the story for this child. It can create this schema, is what we call it, or this pattern that is saying within the brain, hey, this is how we think about relationships. We don't trust people, right? We don't rely on people, or we need to behave in certain ways for them to accept us. So it has incredible implications that way. Early adversity predisposes us to higher risk behavior and negative health outcomes. That's true across the board. We know that from literally thousands of studies. What it doesn't say is that child A who has experienced early adversity will necessarily experience those outcomes, but it certainly says you have a higher risk. Again, it's this whole idea of inertia, right? Unless acted upon by an outside force. So we get to be that outside force to change the trajectory for these kiddos.
I love that.
Oh, go ahead.
I love that thought, to think that God has placed us in these specific classrooms with these specific children to be that shift, right? We can be the ones that make a difference for these children.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a question that it is a high and holy calling to provide love, nurture, and care to a child. Every child is vulnerable. Across the species, we recognize, even from a biological perspective, people respond differently when a young baby or child cries. Hormonally, we are created to protect the young of our species. And in so doing, that's a high and holy calling, right? That is something really profound. We get to step into these places where God could do this without us. Nothing's impossible for God.
Sure.
But he says, hey, I'm going to invite you into this space because I love you so much. And by him loving us, we get to be part of a child's healing and their well-being. One other thing that I would say here, though, is that chronic early adversity can make it so that a child's stress response is just switched into on. Why is that bad? Unfortunately, when you are in stress response, you are not in growth and development. You are in survival mode. The elements of your being, of your thinking, of your brain that facilitate growth and development are essentially shifted into low gear. When we're in survival mode, the way that we have been created to survive things like a cougar running after you, you would not need to think about math concepts or social relationships in that moment. So then to have that kind of permanently switched on, or at least switched on for a long-term period, is really detrimental. It makes it difficult for children to think of the future, even delayed gratification. When you see kids that just cannot manage to wait 10 minutes for the thing they want, one of the things that is really important in these instances is helping kids to understand purpose. And that their life, their purpose is not for this moment, but it is an entire life with good works created since before the beginning of time that God has prepared for them. Once we start to work on that, we can see shifts in this instant gratification. There are some potential risks and potential negative outcomes. That doesn't mean they are necessarily going to come to pass, and we get to be a part of changing that.
This is a great segue into my next question, which is sometimes we think that early adversity equals lifelong struggle, which sometimes it does, but that's not what you're saying. What you're saying is resilience plays a role in the long-term life of these children. Talk a little bit, what is our role?
One of the things that we can do in these kiddos is we can build something called protective factors. We're trying to construct resilience in kiddos. We think about resilience being a formula. 2 ingredients make the recipe of resilience. One of them is challenge. There has to be a challenge. Just like to build a muscle, you have to have a weight that you're pulling against. And then the other thing is protective factors. If we only have challenge without protective factors, or only protective factors without challenge, we will not get resilience. We won't get the ability to overcome. One of the things I would say about our role is we can seed these protective factors in these kiddos so that we can outweigh the significance of those early life challenges. These things are really practical. We want to think about things like giving them stability and safety If a child doesn't have felt safety, they will not learn.
Mm.
We want to give them things like routines and rituals. We want them to know what to expect. We want them to be able to mark the passage of time. Through rituals, we want them to be able to celebrate. We want them to have a belief in themselves and their ability. And I would argue that from the Christian perspective, which I wholeheartedly believe, they need to not just understand that I am good and all of the kind of typical secular affirmations of you're a world changer. They actually need to understand things like you're an eternal soul. You are made in the image of God. God doesn't make mistakes. He has a plan and a purpose for you. We're seeding in them this identity that is much bigger than any of these sort of fluffy things that we can tell them. Kids are very smart and they are very quick to identify things we say that are not true. And so when we're able to go to the truest true, right? This is incredibly powerful. And I would say in all of this, what is key? It's relationship. Relationship with us, relationship with God, relationship with parents and peers and people that love and care about them and reflect through their behavior, you are important and you matter.
I love that you said we need both challenge and protective factors. I think sometimes we can get to the place where we can look at ourselves or the children in our lives and say, there's been so much adversity. It's hard. You can get so focused on the challenge that you forget that challenge is actually necessary for growth, that without challenge, we don't grow. So challenge is not always something to look at negatively, even though sometimes it's really hard. Early adversity, sure, it's terrible, the things that kids have had to endure. But without challenge, there's not growth.
That's right.
And that's a powerful idea to keep in mind, that without some struggle, like you said, if we're not tearing those muscle fibers, we're also not building them.
That's right.
And so while we don't create adversity for children, recognizing that they've been through hard things and that we are part of that healing through providing these protective factors, that's a powerful thing to consider.
And I would make the argument that if your child is not experiencing challenges through those natural means, we actually need to give them challenge. Now, we're not going to give them adversity, but let me give you an example. In our family, we live in the mountains of Peru and we love hiking. Early age, we have worked to build our daughters' capacities so that they can hike mountains with us. Last year, we had a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old who rode a horse, but the others hiked a 15,000-foot mountain.
Wow.
And it was hard. There's no question. It was not like we just flew through it. None of us, including me, flew through this experience. But it's incredible how when somebody does something, whether it's preparing for a public speech or auditioning or doing a physical feat or determining that they're going to raise $100 for their favorite charity, whatever that looks like, it's incredible how after they've done that and they come to you and they say, I don't remember how to write this word or whatever it is. You're like, we had a division facts issue, right? And so one of them was saying, oh, I can't do this 2 days later. And I'm saying, now listen.
You hiked a mountain.
And of course she had that confidence. She was like, oh, of course, you're totally right. And when kids are able to see themselves consistently overcoming, and we make that part of the narrative that they have in our conversations with them, it's incredible how more overcoming leads to more overcoming.
Let's pause this amazing conversation for just a minute so I can share something fun. First, you know you have to get training hours every year. Or maybe you're like me and you're a lifelong learner and you actually love training. You prefer to bounce ideas off of other people who do what you do rather than just listening to a lecture. You'd love to hear from a real live trainer who's passionate about what they teach. And you want affordable training, and you want it all from a biblical perspective. Well, we have the answer at Early Childhood Christian Network. Join us at one of our regional conferences throughout the state of Texas. 6 hours of in-person training, DONE, done for you in one Saturday, as low as $80 per person, and that includes lunch, y'all. High quality, engaging presenters who train from a biblical perspective. We're coming to a city near you. Tyler, Lubbock, Bryan College Station, Houston, and San Antonio in this season. Go to earlychildhoodchristiannetwork.com and click on events for all the details. While we love connecting with you on this podcast, it would be even better to connect with you in person soon. Let's get back to our conversation. This is one of those things in early childhood, like when I was still in a classroom, my 4-year-olds had to open their own lunches. And that meant if mom puts your stuff in a little container with a lid, you're going to try to open that, even though some of these lids, seriously, I think are vacuum sealed and need the Hulk to come and open them. But that struggle of, and they're 4. So it's not like we're going to let them go hungry and not help them if they really can't do it. But I saw it. When you allow them that opportunity to struggle a little bit, to not be successful at something, and then all of a sudden they get it, it's like there's a light bulb moment in their brain, in their bodies, and like their whole demeanor changes, where they go, this is so hard, I can't do it. I did it. Whoa, I did it. And then the next day, they're confident in their ability to do it, and the struggle's a little bit less. And then they encounter the next skill set that they need to learn. I definitely think when we try to do everything for young children, instead of allowing them to struggle a little bit in some of the normal things of life, right? It's like you said, we're not giving them adversity, but allowing them to struggle and have challenge is how we help children develop. It is how we actually build resilience into them, in that they have overcome the regular struggle of life that makes these harder struggles, like you've built the foundation to overcome adversity as well when you build the capacity for these regular challenges of life.
And I think the key here, every single time these challenges, is that we say, I'm here with you. I'm not doing it for you, but you're not alone. There is something profound about any sort of struggle, even suffering, that we can do this when we have relational support, people who say, I'm in it with you. This is true even in those small struggles for little people, because remember, they're little. These small struggles are actually big struggles to them. They need that social support, that stability to say, hey, I'm here and I believe you can do this. I'm not going to do it for you, but you're also not alone.
Yeah, that's important. As an adult, it has made a difference for me to have somebody walking alongside when I'm going through struggle, when I'm going through difficult things, illness or sickness. A friend with stage 4 breast cancer several years ago, and she is healthy and thriving now. During that struggle, she would say, as much as she is independent, the fact that people came and just sat with me on those days that was so hard made all the difference in my own mindset of I was able to make it through the day, to make it through the next day, because I knew I wasn't sitting alone in that hardship. And I think in our early childhood years, maybe it's a little bit different there, but even in sitting with a child who is having some separation anxiety, to say, I know that you miss your mom. You're not used to your mom dropping you off somewhere with strangers, but I'm here with you. And also, as the adult, I'm calm. It's what you said earlier about giving them a sense of felt safety, right? If a child is dropped off with me and is crying and having all this separation anxiety, what my body naturally will do is I will start ramping up too. My heart rate will be faster, my breathing will be shallower, my body will be more tense. So I have to be aware of my own stuff to be able to settle myself down and then sit next to this child to say, I know this is hard, but I'm here with you and I'll be with you all day. And mommy will be back at the end of the day. So there's something about us as adults being able to recognize the symptoms in our own bodies, in our own brains, about how adversity affected us or struggle affected us. And some of this is just like natural body response. Like you said, we are naturally empathetic to young children. What are we doing that might be affecting our ability to really support children well?
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And there's this concept too of like, we can either reflect their emotions where we're climbing into it with them, right? Or we can come alongside them, helping them float through it, saying, I see you. I acknowledge that this is hard. There's no sense of me downplaying this whatsoever. I'm a big person. I'm safe. You can trust me to walk you through this. In order for us to do that, we need to work on our own regulation, which can be very challenging, but it's immensely powerful in guiding kids through difficult things.
Give me some practical ways that we can build protective factors in young children.
Yeah, I think that classrooms are uniquely designed to naturally do this. I think about the rhythms and the routines, and you think about a kid who might be in your classroom living in a chaotic environment. This can happen for many reasons, right? For a variety of reasons, families in crisis, families in an elevated level of stress, but they're able to come to school and they know the rhythm, they know the routine, usually because there are groups of kids who are being more intentional about that, right? Because otherwise you would have chaos on your hands. But that in itself can be an incredible gift to kids who maybe don't know what to expect the next day at home. I think one of the biggest things that I would really want teachers to hear is that talking about challenges, resilience, even growth mindset, are things that have incredible value at young ages. Because the more we can seed these ideas into their ways of thinking, the more automatic it becomes as a habit. And you can do these in small ways, both really explicit ways, like we're going to talk about this, or one of the reasons we created the children's book is so that there's a narrative way to share about this. One of the things we do in our home is we use a lot of scripts. So for example, if somebody in our house says, I can't do it, whatever it is, they know that you will say, and if you don't,
that's good.
You can't do it. What? Because the truth is, they're developing. We are all developing, right? Even as adults, we're still developing our capacities, growing. And so it's not saying, like, I can't is very static, right? But we want them to be thinking about growth processes. I can't do it yet. Or this is too hard for me right now. Sure, all of those things are valid. Those are just observations of facts, but there's no judgment in those, right? I'm not able, I'm not good enough. Those types of things, no, we're not going to do that because those are not true. Those are, I would argue, little lies from the enemy.
I agree.
Weave their way into our children's identity and the ways they conceptualize themselves. Having the conversation, weaving it into school. Like you don't need to make it a new subject, but just thinking about where are the natural opportunities for that and using scripts. I'm a huge fan of those because as a parent, and I would imagine as an early childhood educator, there are so many questions, so many demands on your time and on your presence and on your thinking. So if you can just have those automated banked one-liners that you can offer back to kids, it's amazing. They will pick those up and they will start to say them to themselves, to each other, to you, which can be a little bit annoying. Another thing I would say is helping kids to think through their relational supports. It can be really simple, right? But having that conversation with kids, who are the safe people in your lives? And who would you go to if a hard thing happened? And then even reflecting on things like, what's a time that you overcame a challenge? And oftentimes they'll be like, well, I don't know. Hey, you learned to tie your shoes. You potty trained. You learned to walk. These types of things, like reframing those things as those were challenges that you overcame. Now, objectively, you are an overcomer. That is one label I really like to give kids.
Yeah.
A child will experience challenge. They will experience hardship. And when we're able to reframe it as you're an overcomer and there's nothing we can't get through together, there's immense power in that.
I love that. I think giving kids that big picture also, you said it earlier, about purpose in life. Like you are more than who you are today. God has already created good works for us to do. So you are more than your struggle today. And what you overcome today is actually part of God's preparation for what He's already created you to do and for the tasks that are coming for you. So I love that we get the opportunity to do that. Nicole, this has been such a fun conversation. I want to quickly talk a little bit of Caleb Koala's Comeback Ride. First off, such a sweet book for preschoolers, really, preschool, early elementary, but a story that they can see themselves in. A koala who has an issue with his foot, feels a little bit left out sometimes, I think we can all relate to this. As an adult, an actual bicycle accident and breaks his wrist, which just pulls him into himself. And I can see that for so many of our kids that they might have overcome some things and they're coping. And then there's one thing that happens that just changes. And you see them withdraw and isolate. Why do you think we do that? And how can we help kids come back out into the world?
Yeah. That is such a good question. I am not 100% sure, but I would hypothesize it might have to do a little bit with development and awareness. I remember as you were saying that, I was thinking about this time. I was about 5 years old, and my parents took us to the Y for Family Friday swim night. And all of a sudden, I said to my mom, I can't do a somersault underwater. I did one last week, but I couldn't do it this week. Why can't I do it? So sometimes as we get a little bit older, we are more aware of the risks that we're taking when we do something.
Yeah.
I just have this really clear picture. Like I can see where we were in the pool. And I do think that sometimes that happens with kiddos as they get a little bit older. The challenge can be bigger, it's clearer to them, they have a clearer presence of mind, and all of a sudden it's scary. They're having to deal with similar types of things, but at a deeper level. And I think that those are times in which we can, again, come alongside them and say, as that guide, right? Hey, I'm an adult. I've been through some of these things. You're right. It totally is hard. And I am confident that you can get through this, overcome this, and I'm here to help.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, at the end of the book, Caleb does jump back on his bike and ride and overcomes that hard thing. And I think for many of us, we have our own things that we maybe could pause and take a look at and say, is there something that's maybe holding me back as an adult? And I would encourage you, like listeners, if you're out there, stop and reflect on that for a moment. Is there a thing, whatever, however long ago, or even if it's today or yesterday, that you think might be holding you back from something? And recognize that when you bring that to the Lord, He is enough to help you move forward in that. Take a minute and go to the Lord and say, Lord, for some reason, this is holding me back, but I believe that you are my Redeemer, fully my Redeemer, and let Him actually restore that piece of your life. It is possible to live in full freedom from whatever adversity or hardship that we have faced. I would encourage you, listeners, go get this book, Overcoming. It's a super easy read. It's very accessible. It is not an academic book. It is easily accessible to all of us. And just a great reminder of how big God is in this world that's really hard and sometimes brings about pain and challenge that we wish wasn't there, especially for young kids. We want their entry into this life to be easy, and yet God often uses adversity in their young lives to build humans that do great things for Him. And so I think for all of us, there's a lesson in it. Nicole, thank you for writing and also for sharing your expertise and your heart today. It helps us, I think, to have practical ways that we can support children and each other. I think all the things you mentioned for young children apply to us as adults, and you can be that support for a coworker, for a friend, for a spouse. You can help be part of that resilience building in them too. Nicole, any parting words before we close out this episode?
Just one thing that I had neglected to mention, and it's this, that I think there's strong evidence that early childhood educators not only play this incredibly important role for children, but also for families. I just would encourage reflection around how might you come alongside the parents in these difficult settings, in these difficult situations. You all have so much knowledge and experience, and oftentimes there is no degree to become a parent. And parents sometimes end up with a toddler and they're like, I have no idea what to do. I have one experience. It is my own personal experience. And maybe my parents didn't really knock it out of the park. I think there are these incredible opportunities for investing in kids and in families. I just see the positioning of those serving in early childhood as such an important calling. I'm very grateful for the work that you all are doing. I'm sure that sometimes it goes without thanks. Let me express my gratitude to you all on behalf of everyone else as you play this really important role in our society.
I love that you said that. it's true, our impact on the children and on the families, that we get to make eye contact with parents twice a day, every day. And there are very few other ministries that get that opportunity. So just recognize that what you do matters for eternity, and that God has specifically called and equipped you to do this work. Trust that He's going to guide you along the way. It's worth it. Nicole, thanks for being here today. I loved all that you shared.
It was so fun and such an important group of people who need to hear these things and just need encouragement.
This was one of my most fun conversations. When she said, science is just the discovery of God's creation. What? Science is actually us discovering what God's always known, because He created it all. Nicole and I talked for several more minutes after we finished recording about how important you are for molding and building these young children into who God has called them to be. Don't underestimate God's purpose for this season in your life. Form strong relationships with those children. Get to know their families. You do make a difference. Build intentional routines and rituals into your classroom this fall, and recognize that those simple things are actually part of building resilience in young children. You're actually helping them become who they were meant to be, to overcome those adversities that you know about and those that maybe you don't know about. The children in your classroom can be overcomers, and so can you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Reimagined Childhood with Early Childhood Christian Network, where you'll get practical ideas to implement in your classroom today. You might even be challenged to change your mind about a few things, and you'll always be reminded that your work matters. If you love this episode, would you subscribe and then share it with your coworkers, friends, and family? You can connect with us on a regular basis on Instagram at Early Childhood Christian Net. That's Early Childhood Christian Net. And on Facebook at Early Childhood Christian Network. Remember to visit our show notes for more great resources. We're so glad you're here. See you next time.